She looked me dead in the eyes right there at the dinner table, surrounded by family, and said, "You're useless, mother-in-law." The entire table froze. You could hear the fork slip from my fingers and strike the plate with a cold, metallic ring. I was the one who paid for the dress she wore that night, the one who secretly covered her son's school fees, the one who thought loving quietly meant being accepted. But that night, something changed. Not because I was hurt, but because I finally realized I had been giving everything and forgetting myself. And 1 week later, I erased her from every corner of my life, the bank accounts, the credit card, and most painfully, the place she held in my heart. If you're a mother, or if you've ever been someone's daughter-in-law, you won't want to miss what happened next. The incident didn't begin with the insult. It began weeks earlier, in a much quieter way. It was my grandson's 6th birthday. I remember because I'd spent 2 whole days baking him his favorite chocolate cake. 3 layers, homemade frosting, hand-piped dinosaurs on top, just the way he liked them. I even bought these little green candy trees to decorate the corners. I wanted it to be perfect. He'd always called me Grammy Cake. When he was little, his words, not mine. And though he'd grown more distant lately, I still believed that somewhere deep inside, I still mattered to him. The party was being hosted at my son Ethan's house. Or should I say, their house. Since his marriage to Claire, that home had slowly transformed. Where there had once been cluttered warmth, mismatched furniture, and family photos everywhere. Now there were sleek countertops, spotless floors, and rules about what kind of juice was allowed. I arrived 15 minutes early. Claire barely glanced at me as she opened the door. "Oh," she said, "I thought you'd just drop off the cake. We already ordered one from that French place downtown, but sure. Just set yours on the side table, I guess." No, thank you. No warmth, just tight lips and cold eyes. I looked at the cake she mentioned. It was immaculate. White fondant, golden lettering, expensive and sterile. It looked like it belonged in a magazine, not a child's memory. I placed my homemade cake on the side table and quietly stepped away. No one looked twice at it. During the party, Claire's cake was placed in the center of the table, photographed a dozen times, sung over, and cut with golden utensils. Mine sat alone until the very end, when someone, I think one of Claire's friends, mistook it for an extra and pushed it to the corner to make room for gift bags. Tyler didn't even see it. And still, I smiled. I smiled and helped clear plates. I smiled when Claire made a joke about how people still bake cakes like it's 1982. I smiled when my heart ached so badly, I thought I might excuse myself to cry in the laundry room. But what broke me, what really cracked something inside, was what happened after the guests left. Claire and Ethan were in the kitchen, talking about the cost of the party. I had offered to help tidy up. That's when I overheard Claire say, "Honestly, your mom brings these things on herself. She always shows up with homemade stuff like it's a Hallmark movie. It's kind of sad." And Ethan, my son, he didn't say anything. He didn't defend me. He didn't even flinch. He just said, "Yeah, I guess." I don't know how long I stood there before walking out the back door. A few days passed. I didn't hear from them. No thank you text. No photo of Tyler with a slice of cake. Just silence. But then Claire texted me. Not to apologize, not to acknowledge the birthday. She asked me casually, like we'd spoken yesterday, if I could cover Tyler's new tennis lessons just until Ethan's bonus clears. She said she'd put it on the card I gave her. The card. 6 months ago, during a particularly difficult winter when Ethan was in between jobs, I'd offered to help. I gave Claire a secondary credit card linked to my own account. I told her to use it for groceries, emergencies, things for Tyler. I never imagined it would become her private wallet, but I hadn't checked the balance in months. After her message, I did. What I saw stunned me. Charges from luxury salons, designer clothes, a $220 brunch, spa treatments, one transaction for a mother and me, retreat at a resort I couldn't pronounce. My name was on every receipt. I sat there, staring at the screen, hands trembling. Not because of the money, but because of the truth staring me in the face. She wasn't just disrespecting me. She was using me financially, emotionally, and socially. I raised a son who no longer saw the difference between kindness and convenience. I allowed myself to become a silent sponsor in someone else's lifestyle. And all the while, I told myself that I was needed, that my quiet contributions gave me a place in their lives. But I was wrong. I wasn't needed. I was just available, and available things are easy to ignore until you take them away. I didn't respond to Claire's message that day. I didn't argue. I didn't ask about the charges. I didn't even call Ethan. Instead, I made tea, sat on my couch, and stared out the window as the sun dipped beneath the roofs of the neighborhood. The wind brushed against the curtains. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to clarity. 3 days passed before Ethan called. "Mom, are you all right?" he asked, sounding almost annoyed. "Claire said you didn't respond. She was just asking about Tyler's lessons." I wanted to say so many things, but all I said was, "I'm fine." That Sunday, they invited me for dinner. No special occasion, or at least that's what they claimed. But the moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was off. The table was neatly set, candles lit, wine glasses out. The kind of quiet staging Claire liked when she wanted to make a point. Tyler was already excused to the living room with an iPad. Claire offered me wine but didn't wait for an answer before pouring. We made small talk. Or rather, they made small talk and I nodded. Ethan mentioned work. Claire talked about Tyler's development milestones. I smiled occasionally, listened, observed. Then the real conversation began. "So," Claire said, swirling her wine, "we've been thinking about enrolling Tyler in private tutoring for next semester. You know, to give him a head start." "That sounds like a lot," I said softly. "Well," she continued, "we were hoping you'd support it. I mean, you're already helping and we're so grateful. But you haven't been replying lately and we kind of need to know we can count on you." Count on me? As if I were a service, a backup plan, a silent investor in their curated family project. I took a deep breath. "Claire," I said, "I checked the credit card last week." She blinked briefly, then sipped her wine. "Okay. It's been used for things that aren't Tyler's tutoring, or groceries, or anything close to essential." "Excuse me," her tone sharpened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm saying I noticed," I replied gently, "and I'm reconsidering whether that card needs to remain active." There was a silence, short but charged. Ethan shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. "Mom," he began, "I'm sure Claire didn't mean." "It's not just the card," I interrupted, still calm. "It's the way I've been treated lately. At Tyler's birthday, at dinners, in texts, I felt less like family and more like a utility." Claire scoffed. "Wow, so now you're the victim." "I'm not claiming to be anything," I said. "I'm just done pretending this feels like love." That was when it happened. The moment I will remember word for word until I'm too old to speak. Claire looked at me, straight in the eyes, no fear, no shame, just cold composure. "Maybe the problem is that you expect praise for doing what you should do. Maybe you're just bitter because you're not really needed anymore. Maybe it's time you face that you're just, well, kind of useless now." The fork slipped from my fingers. The soft clink echoed like thunder in my chest. Ethan said nothing, not a word. Just looked at his plate as if hoping it would swallow him whole. I stood up, not in anger, but in a silence that felt heavier than shouting. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "I'll let you know about the card." Then I walked to the door. No one stopped me, not my son, not his wife. Not the child I used to rock to sleep, who now sat in the next room, unaware that a chapter was quietly closing. When I got home that night, I sat at the kitchen table. The tea from earlier was still there, cold. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and deactivated the secondary card, just like that. No message, no warning. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. I wanted the quiet dignity of reclaiming my boundaries. I wanted to stop bleeding into the lives of people who had long stopped noticing the wound. I wanted to be more than available. I wanted to be free, and you know what? They didn't call. Not the next day, not the next week. No apology, no confrontation, just silence. And it was in that silence that I began to heal. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is walk away from the place where she is no longer seen. I used to think being a mother meant never drawing a line. That love, real love, required endurance, even at the cost of myself. When Ethan was born, I remember staying up through endless nights, listening to the sounds of his breathing, his crying, his first little laugh. I remember feeding him when I had a fever, rocking him when my arms ached, telling myself over and over, "Just hold on a little longer. He needs you." And I did. I held on through scraped knees and broken toys, through exam weeks and heartbreaks, through college tuition payments and moving trucks. I held on when he introduced Claire, smiling, uncertain, and said, "Mom, she's the one." And I held on, even tighter, when I felt myself slowly being edged out of the picture frame. Not by hatred, not even by cruelty, but by something far quieter, replacement. See, there's a special kind of grief no one prepares you for. The grief of becoming invisible. Not because you've passed away, but because you've given everything and there's nothing left to notice you by. I watched as holidays became quick texts, as favors turned into expectations, as the word thanks became optional, then extinct. And still I stayed, because that's what we're told, isn't it? That mother's sacrifice. That grandmothers should be grateful just to be there. That aging women should step aside gracefully, smiling as others take the stage. But something shifted after that night at their dinner table. After those words, "You're useless." I didn't just hear them, I believed them for a moment. And that scared me more than anything. Because I realized I wasn't angry at Claire. Not really. And I wasn't even angry at Ethan. I was angry at myself. For giving so much without asking anything in return. For staying silent when I should have spoken. For thinking that love means being needed instead of being respected. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a walk to the little park at the end of my street. Just like I used to, before life became about fixing everyone else's problems. The air was cool. The trees whispered. Children laughed in the distance, and for once it didn't sting. I sat on a wooden bench beneath a sycamore tree, let the sun warm my face. And for the first time in a very long time, I breathed, not out of duty, not out of survival, but simply because I wanted to. You know, they say when a door closes, a window opens. But sometimes, when a door closes, you finally hear yourself think. And I realized something that day. I am not just a mother. I am not just a grandmother. I am not just a helper or a wallet or a name on a card. I am a woman, a full human being, and I deserve to exist outside of who I serve. That evening, I went home and made dinner for one. No need to impress anyone. No pressure to perform. I lit a candle not for romance, but for ritual. I poured a glass of wine not for stress, but for self. And I sat at the table alone, but I was not lonely. I was free, if you've ever felt forgotten. If you've ever loved someone so much that you lost your reflection in them. If you've ever believed that being quiet made you good, then I want to tell you something. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to stop giving. You are allowed to say, no more. And you are allowed to heal. That night, I opened my journal for the first time in years, and I wrote just one line, "I will not disappear quietly." And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of everything. It had been a week. A full 7 days since I deactivated the card, and still, no calls, no messages, no apology. Just silence. And to my own surprise, I didn't wait for one. I didn't sit by the phone. I didn't check the mail hoping for some gesture. I had stopped needing anything from them. That need had been the real chain. But on the 8th day, my phone finally rang. It was Ethan. "Hey Mom, Claire's been trying to reach you," he said. "She's confused, hurt, even you just cut her off without a word." I closed my eyes, not out of frustration, but from the weight of what I was about to say. "Ethan," I began, "I gave you both time, I gave you space. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. But somewhere along the way, giving turned into erasing myself. There was a pause. "Look, I know Claire said some harsh things," he replied. "But she's stressed. Parenting is hard, work's been tight, and she feels like she's being judged all the time." "I never judged her," I said softly. "I accepted her, even when she made me feel like a guest in your lives. Then why now? Ethan asked. Why pull back now after everything? Because love without boundaries becomes exploitation. And I can't be part of a system that only sees me as useful when I'm giving. I didn't raise you to need money more than compassion. I didn't raise you to be silent when someone disrespects your own mother. And I didn't raise myself to be invisible. There was a long silence on the line, then something cracked. Ethan's voice trembling just slightly. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have spoken up that night. I just didn't know how to choose between you two. And that was the moment. The moment I realized he still hadn't learned, because it was never about choosing sides. It was about choosing what was right. You don't have to choose between us, Ethan, I said. You only need to choose the kind of man you want to be. And whatever that choice is, I will step back, not in anger, but in peace. I hung up gently, and I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't crumble. Because that, right there, was closure. Not from them, but from the version of me that used to beg for scraps of love. Later that week, I boxed up the few photos I still had of all of us together. Not out of bitterness, but out of preservation. Some stories don't need to be erased. They just need to be placed on a shelf where they belong. I started attending a small community book club every Wednesday. I planted tulips in my backyard. I painted a corner of my kitchen pale yellow just because it made me smile. I began living a life that wasn't about being someone's something. It was simply about being me. If you're listening to this, maybe you've felt it too, that quiet ache, that gnawing doubt. That moment when someone you love makes you feel like you've outlived your usefulness. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be someone's convenience. You were never born to stay silent just to keep the peace. And you were never supposed to keep giving after you've run dry. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't in confronting others. It's in choosing yourself. It's in walking away without resentment. It's in reclaiming your voice, not to shout, but to whisper, enough. And if no one else tells you this today, let me be the one to say, you are not useless. You are not forgotten. You are still here. And that is more than enough.